August 12, 1962, the Copa Room at the Sands Hotel, Las Vegas. The band hesitates, just for a fraction of a second, not because of a missed note, because something has gone wrong in the front row. Laughter cuts through the room, sharp and out of place. A tuxedo on stage is suddenly soaked. 2,000 people freeze, unsure whether they are watching entertainment or humiliation. In a city where power usually decides what can be ignored, one man steps forward early, and the night can no longer go back to how it was. What happened that night was not simply an interruption in a Vegas show, it was a collision between entertainment and power, between silence and dignity. Las Vegas in the early 1960s was built on an unspoken agreement. Music kept playing, money kept flowing, and certain men were never challenged, especially in public. Performers understood this better than anyone. They learned when to smile, when to look away, when to absorb disrespect without reacting, because reacting could cost bookings, or worse. On the surface, this was a minor incident, an audience member crossing a line, a moment that could have been smoothed over, ignored, forgotten by morning. That was the expectation. That was how the city functioned. But this night refused to stay small, because one man did not treat it as just part of the business. He did not laugh it off. He did not wait for management. He did not let the show move on. Instead, he made a choice that turned a private humiliation into a public reckoning. Not with violence, not with threats, but by forcing an entire room to acknowledge what it had just witnessed. The consequences of that decision would ripple far beyond the Copa Room, reshaping how loyalty, power, and dignity were remembered in the legend of Las Vegas. Las Vegas in the early 1960s was not simply a city. It was a system held together by lights, contracts, favors, and a quiet understanding of who truly held leverage when the room went dark. The Copa Room at the Sands Hotel was one of its most polished stages. Tables sat close to the edge of the platform, close enough that performers could hear laughter, feel eyes, sense mood shifts in real time. This intimacy was part of the appeal and part of the danger. When a night went right, it felt electric. When it went wrong, there was nowhere to hide. Behind the glamour sat rules that were never written down. Shows must go on. High-paying guests must be kept comfortable. Problems must be smoothed over quietly, preferably before anyone noticed. For entertainers, especially those without the luxury of total protection, survival meant learning these rules early. It meant understanding that dignity was negotiable and silence often safer than confrontation. Among those who understood this reality better than most was Sammy Davis Jr. On stage, Sammy was movement and precision, voice, rhythm, timing perfectly fused. He commanded attention not by demanding it, but by earning it note by note. Off stage, however, he lived with constant calculation. When to push, when to endure, when to pretend something hadn't happened. His career had taught him that reacting publicly could shift the spotlight in ways he could not control. Standing nearby that night was Dean Martin, a man often misunderstood because of how effortlessly he seemed to move through the world. Dean's public image was relaxed, almost careless, a glass in hand, a crooked smile, the sense that nothing rattled him. But beneath that image was something sharper. Dean Martin had learned the mechanics of rooms like the Copa. He understood timing, pressure, and how authority could be exercised without raising a voice. His strength was not confrontation. It was positioning. Knowing when presence alone could change the temperature of a space. He also understood loyalty in a way that wasn't performative. Among the Rat Pack, bonds were tested nightly, by audiences, by egos, by the city itself. Some nights required jokes, others required restraint, and occasionally a line had to be drawn. Hovering in the background was Frank Sinatra, whose relationship with Las Vegas power structures was well known, though rarely spoken about directly. Sinatra represented influence, someone venues listened to, someone whose displeasure carried consequences. But influence, on its own, was not the same as intervention. Also present, though unseen by the audience, was the machinery of the sands itself, management, security, people whose job was to ensure nothing disrupted the illusion. Their role was not to judge what was right, but to restore order as quickly as possible. And then there was the audience. 2,000 people dressed for a night of escapism, suddenly aware they were witnessing something uncomfortable. They understood instinctively that this was not a scripted moment, that the laughter they had heard did not belong to the show. And like many crowds faced with unease, they waited, hoping someone else would decide what happened next. This was the environment in which the incident unfolded. A room trained to look away, a city practiced at silence, and 2 men on stage, each carrying a different kind of risk. One had learned how to endure humiliation and keep performing. The other had learned when endurance became complicity. What followed would test which instinct would win. The night begins the way hundreds of nights before it had. The room is warm with alcohol and anticipation. Glasses clink softly against tabletops. Cigarette smoke hangs low, blurring the edges of faces nearest the stage. The band settles into a familiar rhythm, tight, controlled, reliable. This is not a crowd looking for surprises. It is a crowd that is paid to be reassured. Sammy steps into the light. He is in full command almost immediately. His timing is precise, his movement effortless, his voice sliding cleanly between restraint and intensity. The kind of performance that quiets a room without asking it to be quiet. Heads turn forward. Conversations pause. The Copa room does what it is designed to do. It listens. From the edge of the stage, the mood feels right. But in the front row, something is slightly off. It begins subtly. A laugh that arrives a beat too late. A comment not meant for the performer, but loud enough to be heard by those seated nearby. Nothing overt, nothing that requires intervention, just enough to register as disrespect if someone is paying attention. Sammy keeps going. He has learned over years of stages like this that attention is a fragile thing. You don't chase it. You don't confront it. You keep moving and let the music carry you past whatever threatens to break the spell. As the song builds, the audience leans in. This is the part where the room usually disappears, where even the front tables stop mattering. That is when it happens. A sudden movement from below the stage, liquid splashing where it doesn't belong. The sound is wrong, not applause, not laughter meant for the act, but something sharper. For a split second, no one is sure what they've just seen. Then they see Sammy, his jacket darkened, his posture stiffening as he absorbs what has been done without reacting. The band hesitates, unsure whether to continue. The room exhales, collectively realizing this is no longer part of the performance. The laughter comes again, this time unmistakable. Not everyone laughs, but enough people don't stop it. Sammy takes half a step back, then steadies himself. His face remains controlled, almost expressionless. This is not confusion. This is calculation. He knows exactly how many eyes are on him, and exactly how quickly a reaction could turn into a narrative he cannot control. So he does what he has always done. He turns back toward the microphone. The show, it seems, is expected to continue. From the wings, Dean sees all of it. He sees the delay in the band. He sees the stillness in Sammy's body. The kind that comes from restraint, not shock. He sees the front row table, too comfortable with what it has just done. Dean is not scheduled to enter yet. His moment is later. His role tonight is supposed to be light, easy, unthreatening. That is the rhythm of these shows. Everyone knows their place. But this is not a rhythm he recognizes anymore. He steps out early. There is no announcement. No dramatic entrance. Just a man walking into the light and stopping beside another man who did not ask for help, but clearly needs it. The room notices immediately. Dean doesn't look at the audience first. He looks at Sammy, a brief glance. Not a question, not permission, just acknowledgement. Then he turns toward the front row. His voice is calm when he speaks. Not loud, not sharp. Calm enough that the room has to lean in to hear him. This is not how confrontations usually start in Las Vegas. Someone from the front table responds, confident, amused, unbothered by the fact that the entire room is now listening. Dean doesn't match the tone. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't insult anyone. He simply states what has just occurred and what will not continue. There is a pause. The kind of pause that stretches because no one is sure who is supposed to move next. Security remains where it is. Management does not rush in. The band stays silent. The responsibility settles on the stage. Dean shifts his stance slightly, enough to be unmistakable. He is no longer part of the show. He is part of the room. He makes it clear, without threatening, that the performance can stop, that refunds can be issued, that this night can end with an explanation no one in that front row will enjoy reading tomorrow morning. This is not about punishment. It is about exposure. The audience senses it. The laughter has vanished. People avert their eyes, suddenly aware of their own proximity to the moment. No one wants to be remembered as having cheered. Sammy remains still. He has not said a word. And that silence, his silence, changes the weight of everything. Because this is no longer about a performer reacting badly. It is about a man being forced to decide whether his dignity will be acknowledged or dismissed in front of witnesses. The front row table realizes this too. What began as a moment of dominance has shifted, not because anyone has shouted, but because someone on stage has refused to let the room pretend nothing happened. The next move will define the night. The room does not move. No applause, no music, no laughter trying to rescue the moment, only the sound of glasses settling back onto tables one by one as people realize they should not be holding them anymore. Dean stands still beside Sammy, close enough that there is no confusion about where he has chosen to be, not in front of him, not behind him, beside him. The man at the front table speaks again, quieter this time, still confident, but the confidence now has an edge to it. The kind that asks a question without phrasing it as one. Dean lets the silence stretch before answering. He does not rush. He does not perform. He waits until the room has nowhere else to look but at him. Then he speaks. Not to the table, to the room. He says that this stage is not owned, that the man standing next to him is not an object, that whatever money was paid tonight did not include the right to humiliate someone for amusement. The words are simple, almost plain, but they land with weight because of where they are spoken and who is hearing them. The front row shifts, not aggressively, uncomfortably. This is the moment when Las Vegas usually corrects itself, when management steps in, when a joke is made, when the incident is smoothed over and everyone is invited to pretend it never happened. None of that occurs. Dean continues, slowly now. He explains that the show can stop, that the lights can come up, that the night can end with a very clear explanation of why 2,000 people are being sent home early. He does not threaten anyone. He outlines consequences. The difference matters. The audience understands it immediately. This is not bravado. This is leverage. The kind that works quietly, efficiently, and without spectacle. The man at the table realizes it too, because power in this city depends on discretion, on things staying off the record, on stories not traveling further than they need to. And suddenly, this story is poised to travel everywhere. Dean shifts his gaze back to Sammy. It is a small movement, almost unnoticeable, but it reframes everything. And then he says it. He calls him his brother, not as a punchline, not for applause, not loudly. He says it the way people do when they mean it, once, and without decoration. The word changes the temperature of the room. Brotherhood is not something the audience can dismiss as professional courtesy. It is not a contractual relationship. It is not a performance choice. It is a line. The front table goes quiet. The pause that follows is heavier than anything that has happened so far, because now there are only two paths left. Either the moment is acknowledged, or it becomes something much larger than anyone intended. Finally, someone stands. The movement is stiff, deliberate, not triumphant. The apology, when it comes, is restrained, measured, offered not because the man has been persuaded, but because he has been cornered by visibility. Dean does not react. He waits until the words are spoken clearly enough for the room to hear them, until there is no ambiguity about what just occurred. Then he turns to Sammy. He asks one question, quietly. Sammy answers just as quietly. Yes, that is all. Dean nods once, not in victory, in closure. He makes it clear that the show will continue, but not like before. Not as if nothing happened, as if something important has been settled. The band resumes. The music sounds different now. Not louder, not faster, heavier, charged with a tension that wasn't there at the start of the night. Sammy steps back into the song. His voice is steadier than before, not because the humiliation has disappeared, but because it has been seen, named, and refused. The audience rises when he finishes, some out of admiration, some out of relief, some because they are unsure what else to do with the feeling sitting in their chest. Dean does not take a bow. He steps back into the wings, leaving the spotlight where it belongs. The confrontation is over, but the cost of what just happened is only beginning to take shape. The show continues, but it never truly returns to what it was. From the audience, the music sounds the same. The melody holds. The timing is precise. Applause arrives on cue. To anyone walking in late, it might appear that the interruption was brief, insignificant. Backstage, no one believes that. Sammy finishes his set to a standing ovation, yet the adrenaline that usually follows a triumph doesn't arrive. What lingers instead is awareness, the kind that comes after something irreversible. He knows what it means to be defended publicly in a city that survives on quiet compromises. He also knows what it can cost. Dean does not celebrate. He retreats to his dressing room without ceremony, loosening his tie, sitting longer than usual before speaking to anyone. This was never about winning a moment. It was about accepting consequences that had not yet revealed themselves. Vegas remembers everything, even when it pretends not to. Word spreads quickly, but carefully. Not in headlines, not in official statements, in hallways, in phone calls made after midnight. In the particular way certain people stop smiling when a name is mentioned. Management is polite, appreciative even. But the tone has shifted. The unspoken question now exists. Was that necessary? No one asks it directly. Security replays the night in their heads, aware of how close they came to being forced to choose a side. Some are relieved they never had to move. Others are unsettled by what might have happened if the choice had been unavoidable. And the front row table? They remain for the rest of the evening, but subdued. The laughter does not return. The performance is watched, not consumed. Whatever authority they believed they carried into the room did not leave with them intact. The city absorbs the incident the way it always does, quietly, selectively. No official fallout, no public reckoning, just a subtle recalibration. For Sammy, something internal shifts. He has endured humiliation before, often, but this time he did not endure it alone. Someone interrupted the pattern. Someone forced the room to acknowledge what it preferred to ignore. That knowledge stays with him. For Dean, the cost is less visible, but heavier. There are rooms he is not invited into as quickly as before, conversations that end sooner than expected, a sense that some people now watch him more closely, weighing whether he is predictable enough to be trusted. He accepts it without comment. Because what he did was not impulsive, it was deliberate, and deliberation implies acceptance. Years later, when the night is remembered, if it is remembered at all, it is rarely described accurately. Details blur, names fade, motives are simplified, but one thing remains consistent in every version. There was a moment when the show could have continued as if nothing happened, and someone chose not to let it. That choice did not change Las Vegas overnight. It did not dismantle its power structures or rewrite its rules, but it exposed them. And for one night in the Copa room, dignity was not negotiable. Stories like this are often remembered for their confrontation, for the tension, for the danger implied by who was present and who was challenged. But that is not where its meaning truly lives. The deeper truth is quieter. In places built on spectacle, dignity is usually the first thing traded away. Not because people don't value it, but because survival teaches them to postpone it, to tell themselves there will be another night, another stage, another chance to push back when the cost feels lower. That night in the Copa room revealed how rarely that chance actually comes. Sammy's restraint was not weakness. It was adaptation, a skill learned in an industry where talent alone was never enough protection. His silence was the silence of someone who understood the consequences of being visible in the wrong way. Dean's intervention was not courage in the dramatic sense, it was refusal. A refusal to let the room redefine what was acceptable simply because power expected compliance. He did not act because he believed he was untouchable. He acted knowing he wasn't. That distinction matters, because most injustices do not persist due to cruelty alone. They persist because too many people decide it is safer to let them pass, to look away, to rationalize, to tell themselves it is not their moment to intervene. What happened on that stage was not a victory over power. Power remained exactly where it was the next morning. The city kept running. The lights stayed on. But something else happened. For a brief moment, the rules were made visible. And once rules are visible, they can no longer pretend to be natural. That is why this story endures. Not because someone was humiliated, and not because someone else spoke up, but because a room full of people was forced to see the cost of silence, and the weight carried by the rare decision to break it. There are nights in Las Vegas remembered for songs, for punchlines, for the glow of chandeliers, and the illusion that nothing serious ever happens under stage lights. And then, there are nights remembered for silence, for the moment when music stops, not because it failed, but because someone decided it could not continue like this, for the second when a room realizes it is no longer watching a performance, but participating in a choice. That night in the Copa room did not end the city's compromises. It did not dismantle its hierarchies, but it left behind a question that could not be unasked. How many moments like this pass unnoticed, not because no one sees them, but because everyone waits for someone else to speak first? History often celebrates voices raised loudly. But sometimes, the most lasting echoes come from a calm refusal, spoken once, in the right place, with witnesses who never forget what they almost ignored. In the next story, the silence won. No one stepped forward. And the cost was far greater than anyone realized at the time. What do you think? Was that night about courage or about timing?